Digital design series. Thank you. The digital design series continues. This is Jim Satzinger, AIA Oregon Ben Director. AIA Oregon Presents, 3 AIA Oregon small firms, 3 community spaces. Bruce Richey, AIA Medford, Oregon, project The Camelot Theater. Guggenheim Architecture and Design Studio, Portland, Oregon. Jeff Guggenheim, AIA. Jenny Guggenheim. Reid Leslie, Beaverton Christian Church. And Balance Architecture, Rex Prater, AIA, Eugene, Oregon. Oregon Imaging Center. Coming up in the Digital Design Series, June 3rd, 5 p.m., Paula Baker-Laporte, FAIA, Nature is the Gold Standard for a Healthy Human Environment, 1LU HSW. June 10th, 5 p.m., West of West Architecture and Design Studio, Clay Taylor, AIA, Jessica Harwell, Project Engineer, Turner Construction, 1LU HSW. Now for today's AIA Oregon Presents, Stan Hahn, past president, AIA Southwestern Oregon, former AIA Oregon board member, and active on the AIA Oregon Small Firms Exchange. Stan.
Well, it's my pleasure to moderate today and or introduce. As you know, small firms is a term that may include firms up to 10 or so practitioners, and of the 95,000 members of the AIA, I think it's accurate to say that a majority are in small firms. We couldn't dig that detail out today to confirm that, but I think it's true. And if you scan through the knowledge communities from the AIA, there is a one that is dedicated on small project practitioners in particular that you may want to take a look at. So in our area, we began a small firms exchange in 2016, meeting bi-monthly, social networking, project sharing, and bringing in resource people to speak on specific topics of interest. So today, we're featuring 3 small firms, and our first up is Bruce Richey. Bruce is from Medford. Bruce has, let's see, there we go, 30 years of diversified design experience in healthcare, office, educational, institutional, commercial, residential projects, recognized for his design work, emphasized the team approach, and that includes collaborating with engineering and other selected consultants early in the design process. Projects using CAD, drafting to model conceptual designs, produce construction documents. Bruce is a native Oregonian. Again, he's practicing in Medford. He's from the small historic community of Brockway. I'm sure he'll give us a little description on how to get there. His special interests in historic vernacular architecture and energy conservation have led to many unique projects, from teaching passive solar design classes to recording historic buildings. And he's participated in the Architect in Residence program in Rogue Valley Elementary Schools. It's our pleasure to turn the screen over to Bruce Richey.
Thank you, Stan. So I'll give you a little background. I graduated from Oregon in 1977. So there might be a few of you from back in that era. And I took a design studio from Richard Garfield to design a performing arts theater, which I honestly thought I would never do in real life. And some of you might know that Richard partnered up with Tom Hacker. For a while, it was Garfield Hacker. And so here I am 35 years later. I got the opportunity to design this theater. It's located in Talent, And I know most of you know the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland. Talent is about 4 miles north of Ashland, a small community. The Camelot Theater Company started in about 1990. And this was the original building. It was a feed and seed store that they then converted to their theater building. And they worked out of this building for years. The City of Talent, as part of their redevelopment, decided that the realignment of the street would run right through the middle of the existing Camelot Theater. So they had about 2 years to come up with a way to relocate or find a new home for the theater. But Talent really wanted them to stay in the city. And they made an adjacent lot available to them. And I think for like $1 a year lease. So it was a very tight site, and squeezing, about a 8,600 square foot building on a 13,000 square foot lot was certainly a challenge. At the time that I started to design, the Earth Advantage Institute had just come out with their pilot program for small commercial buildings. And I was able to get the project included in that. And we went through all of the, the scoping meetings and everything to establish which level we would try for with the, with the design and the construction of the new theater. And settled on the gold level as the one that made the most sense for what we were trying to do. So it incorporated at the time, and again, the theater was completed in 1910. So it's, at the time we were doing everything above and, better than code and they had the categories of, water conservation and environmentally preferable materials, recycling, construction waste, superior insulation, and super efficient heating and cooling systems. So basically to save 30% more energy than a code building. The initial design started with the seats. The Camelot Theater had received a donation of theater seats that were taken out of the Southern Oregon University Recital Hall, and they'd warehoused them for a couple of years. So basically, I started to design with the seating configurations and came up with, the herringbone configuration you see in this plan. And then everything else sort of, grew out of that layout for the seating. I was really fortunate to be able to receive advice from Richard Hay, who's the senior theater designer at Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And he gave me some, invaluable pointers, and also commandeered his acoustical engineers that were down from Portland to spend a Sunday morning with me going over the drawings and, giving me their suggestions for, the design, which again, it was great. They also put me in touch with the theater consultants in San Francisco that they used, because I knew nothing about catwalk systems and theater lighting. And so when I contacted the theater consultants, they wanted to, do the whole design, and, that wasn't going to work. So finally convinced them to do just the portion that we needed. And then when I went to put out the construction documents, I asked if they wanted to be included on the, recognized, and they politely said they did not want to be included because they didn't get to design the theater. So there's more to that story at the end. So basically, the old converted feed store was incredibly, intimate, to the point where I attended plays there, and if I stood up in the back row, I hit my head on the ceiling. And so they really wanted the new theater to have the same kind of intimacy, albeit with more headroom. The concept to, again, recognize that we were in a recession, and the final cost was incredibly important for their fundraising. Started with a pre-engineered metal building, and I apologize for the construction document, but I just show you the auditorium, the stage, and the backstage area is basically a pre-engineered metal building. The front lobby entrance was a steel frame structure. Part of designing those seats, they came in two widths, 20 inches and 21 inches. So I had to work that layout so that I could make those different seat widths work in this plan. And that came back to be an interesting little trick a little bit later. That's the mezzanine level, the catwalk system. The cross section just showing, the structural system and what went into the, the different components. And just a few wall sections. It's a very robust envelope, not only for, thermal insulation, but also for sound, because there was the concern of street noise and what you would, be really cautious of with a theater design. I just threw this in here, even though it's not clear. Basically, the stucco front with different layers of foam. This was a key drawing, so they would know what thickness of foam to put where before they, applied the stucco. So during construction, Adroit Construction from Ashland was the low bidder. I had a cost estimate done by architectural cost consultants in Portland, which I'm sure most of you know. And they had pinned the price at 2.2 million. When we received the bids, it was 1.5 million. It was $700,000 under the estimate, due mainly to the recession, and everybody just needed work. So there were a lot of smiling faces at the bid opening. So I'll just run through. That's the beginning of the steel structure for the lobby, and a continuation of that, and the beginning of the pre-engineered metal building erection. When I submitted the initial design to the planning department at City of Talent, the part-time director and an architectural consultant, historical consultant, had just developed new design guidelines for the downtown area. And the design I presented to them we did not see eye to eye on it, and they said they wouldn't support it. So we did not have the time or the budget to push back on that. So I, went back and did some redesign to basically satisfy them. And it's obviously an unfortunate occurrence when that happens to us. I guess the frustrating part is they needed to have a backstory of why the building evolved. So basically I created a backstory that the building started out as a barn, was changed to a livery stable, blacksmith shop, later became an automobile repair shop, then transitioned to a movie theater, and then finally to a performing arts theater. I am no fan of creating, faux history with architecture, but that's what happened. So you can see the metal building, the pre-engineered structure, and the groots in that shot. The seating that went through different ideas of how to economically do the auditorium seating, and decided to go with the EPS geofoam structural blocks. So basically the blocks came all pre-cut, pre-numbered to put together like a puzzle. And by and large, it went well. There had to be a little bit of field cutting, but it comes with their formwork. So they set the formwork after the blocks are set to pour the concrete. So these are current pictures of the theater. Again, the little eyebrow shades over the windows were supposedly the car repair bays that were filled in, and sort of the Art Deco theme of the front entry and the lobby. And these are current pictures. You can see by what's on the marquee, because right now all the theaters are closed down just outside the entrance. And the south elevation. The roof, the whole building orientation gave this, great south exposure. And so we planned for future photovoltaic panels. They've never gone ahead and done that, but basically it was planned for in the design, and the standing seam metal roof, is perfect for that application. Just a few pictures of the interior lobby, the finished lobby, and the concessions. In the auditorium, and then the catwalk system and the lighting, the HVAC system, that was obviously very critical in terms of sound. And I had long discussions with the mechanical engineer that the design needed to be whisper quiet when it was on, and all of the roof mounted equipment is located on the lobby roof, which is a separate structure from the auditorium with vibration isolators. So the noise was almost non-existent, and when they turned the system on initially, it truly was whisper quiet. You couldn't hear any air movement, which was wonderful. So again, the seats, after all the concrete was poured, everything ready, I got a call from the board president, and he said, we made a mistake. We gave you the wrong widths of the seats. They aren't 20 and 21 inches wide. They're 21 and 22 inches wide. And I thought he was kidding, but he wasn't the kind of person to kid. So the only thing that saved me is I had actually left a little bit of extra room just as a fudge factor, you know, as the seats came over close to the aisles. So went back and reconfigured all of the seating based on these new seat widths, and it worked out fine. They fit and they didn't, you know, obstruct anything. It was just a little too much of a thrill for me at that point. And you can see the, you know, the catwalk system above. In the view from the stage looking back at the auditorium. In this picture, those black panels, the acoustic panels, that was right before they were wrapped with the acoustic fabric. And the backstage looking in. And the very first play that was presented in the new theater was Sweeney Todd. And they did a really great job. It was a lot of fun. And needless to say, I went back 3 or 4 times to see it over and over again. At the end, I got an email from those theater consultants that I had used for the system, and they said that the architect in charge of the US exhibit to the Prague Quadrennial was looking for small community theaters to be included in their exhibit. And they asked me if I wouldn't get in touch with that architect and see if he would like to include the Camelot Theater. So I, you know, packaged up the drawings and, you know, the presentation material and sent it off to him. And he got back to me and said that they would like to include the theater in their exhibit. So off it went to Prague back in 2011. And I was fortunate enough to be able to take my 2 daughters to Prague so that we could spend a week during the quadrennial looking at everything. It's quite an experience. And if any of you have thought of a place you'd like to go, and for me, Prague was definitely not high on my list, but it's a wonderful city, and it's literally an architectural museum in itself. But the quadrennial was quite an experience to see theater designs from all over the world, and go to, you know, talks by you know, famous architects, and just experience everything. So the theater has been very successful, and they've grown, and up until obviously a few months ago, they were just, you know, growing every year. And so hopefully once we're sort of on the other side of all this, they'll be able to get back and put on their productions. They do, you know, a really wonderful job with musicals and drama, and they also have what they call spotlights, which are musical presentations. And that's the Camelot Theater.
Thank you, Bruce. That's what a treat. We decided earlier that we'd hold Q&A until the conclusion of the 3 projects being presented, and trust we'll have a few minutes then to open it up for questions. But I'm going to move right on to, we're going to go from talent back up to the big city and head to Beaverton and spotlight a project by Jeff Guggenheim. Guggenheim Architecture Design Studio. It's described as a multidisciplinary creative atelier that integrates architecture, interiors, and brand direction, known for highly considered architectural spaces, rich interior environments, produce custom details specific to each project and client with an eye for engaging one-of-a-kind design elements. Jeff's a licensed architect, lead accredited professional, and I'll say he's been very active in the Portland Small Firms Exchange. Prior to joining the studio, he spent 5 years at GS Architects, where he says he honed his residential and small-scale commercial design skills by working on all aspects of new homes, additions, and remodels. So in addition to his work experience, he's received awards for an array of architecture and design competitions. So, Jeff, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. So today we'll be looking at Beaverton Christian Church. And to give you a little bit of context, so we've got Beaverton, Oregon here, and the church is, this main building was built in 1992, and, it's been home for Beaverton Christian Church for, since then. And in 2017, Beaverton Christian merged with Willamette Christian Church and underwent sort of a church adoption. And, at the time, services only filled maybe 400 out of the 1,400 seats. And so it was, Willamette came in with the idea of, refreshing the spaces, rebranding the church, and attracting, a larger, congregation, and, really revitalizing the church. And so, going to the inside, we've got, so here's the entryway to the church. And to give you a little context for what the existing lobby space looked like, it's about 8,000 square feet, has this beautiful green carpet, lots of really nice windows and good daylight, but the space was just oversized and very large. And it did serve as their social space, but if there weren't that many people in it, it just felt kind of overwhelming and wasn't a very nice place to occupy. And so with that, the Beaverton Christian reached out to us, and it was a design team comprised of myself, my business partner and wife, and our studio's interior designer, Jenny Guggenheim, and then Reid Leslie, who, kind of funny, connecting back to the thread started earlier in the previous presentation, Reid had just, prior to working for us, he worked for Richard Garfield. So it's a pretty small state when it comes to us architects. And so, the lobby hadn't undergone any real changes since 1992. And we identified 5 key areas that, were, kind of lacking. There was a closed off reception space located here.
Jeff, we're still seeing the Google image.
Oh, are you serious?
The aerial image, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for speaking up.
There we go.
Okay, you see it now? Great. Okay, so front of the building and entering, and so this is the lobby I'm telling you all about. So
the green carpet makes more sense now.
Yeah, everyone can see this, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep.
An existing closed off reception area here, kind of a cafe and gift shop located in this corner. And, it's just a very massive space. Stairs, kind of closed off balcony up above. And so, we identified these 5 areas. So the reception area was closed off, the cafe was inefficient, the stairway leading up was unused, the entire lobby was kind of ill-defined, and that the kind of opaque balcony kind of was kind of located, above, and was imposing kind of in its, kind of aesthetic. So in our very first design meeting, we identified kind of key areas and of, within this space that we wanted to address. And these ended up kind of, we, called like, we had like identified reception and, living room. And you'll find that as we go through this presentation that all of these areas really get refined down to about 4 key areas. First meeting, we presented a lot of precedent imagery. And one thing that Beaverton Christian wanted to do was really look at how, what the future of, a church might be. And, we referenced a lot of, student unions and, kind of more like spaces that you wouldn't necessarily associate with, a religious institution, but, maybe more with colleges and study spaces and breakout spaces and offices. And, looking at, the, interesting uses for, stairways, the stadium seating. And, we presented all of these images kind of in our first meeting. And I think what's really nice is that you can see how these kind of then, relate to the final design that we arrived at. So, based on that preliminary kind of diagram, these were the 5 areas that we identified in the space. And that there was the reception, which is the kind of node number 1, cafe being node number 2, the stairway, the living room, and then a feature wall. And so you can see how those, end up finding themselves in our plan. And we've, created, here's our cafe, the reception, feature wall, living room, stairway. And that, we've broken up the room into kind of these distinct smaller areas that really bring down the scale and relate to, the uses of the space. And that, someone might feel comfortable sitting here and not, it might not feel like they're just sitting in the middle of a really large room. And kind of walking through this. So this was, from our first design meeting, talking about the reception. And then in our second design meeting, we, showed some additional precedent imagery and started thinking about, what this might look like in 3D. And then as we kind of move through into design development, we refine and hone this, and then ultimately arrive at a final design that looked like this. And then, moving on to the living room space from our plan, we, started with kind of this idea of a grouping of furniture and like a material change on the floor. And then, moved into thinking about, how we might treat the ceiling above the space to bring, the scale of it down. And then ultimately, this was a rendering that we produced in design development, showing that, along with some of our other ideas for the space. And then ultimately, this is what, that living room space became. We clad the wall in wood. We had these large light fixtures that reduced the scale of the space, and then, brought in a grouping of furniture and a wood floor to really define kind of what is really a room within a room. And the furniture pieces here were all custom and designed for this space in mind. Moving on to the stair. So we knew that, the stair wasn't being used, it was really just being used only as a stair, and we felt that it could be much more. And we really liked the idea that, like Wyden and Kennedy and at Nike, you've seen kind of the idea of the stadium stair. And that was something that we wanted to introduce into this space. And so we kind of looked at a few different configurations and ultimately arrived at this. And it's been incredibly successful. And has been used. It's as just a breakout space to have a conversation, but they'll do pictures, like they'll set people up on pictures for it, or sometimes put on small performances, where people can gather on and watch a performance. But it's really become kind of a vital part of the space. Originally we didn't even envision there being a feature wall here. We knew that we wanted a transition space from the lobby into the sanctuary. And as we explored it more, we realized that, one thing that, when the pastor was up on the stage, that whenever someone would enter or exit the sanctuary, it would kind of blast light into the space, because the lobby was so, received so much natural daylight, that, there was a desire actually for maybe a wall there to, prevent some of the light. And that ended up, really becoming kind of this central focal point in the space. And we created a long bench along it, slatted wood wall with video monitors so that people could watch a service with, integrated audio. And we integrated that all into a new guardrail that really opened up that kind of upper second floor to the lobby, and kind of added some transparency there. Moving on, we had cafe. There was certainly a desire to create that space they put on a really nice coffee and tea service there, and creating a space that people could congregate and hang out in. And it was also viewed as going to be a breakout space for the church's offices, so their staff could go and hang out down there and have a meeting. And so this was a rendering and design development, and then ultimately the space. This is the space. And the idea, for a long, we bounced between whether or not this should be a true cafe versus something that could be set up with like have coffee brought out to it. And it was decided that it was better to just keep the space flexible and have the ability to bring the coffee and tea out during a service, or for after service in that space. Once again, like pieces of furniture, we kind of designed this table and these furniture elements on casters. And we just feel, as a studio, we really like designing furniture, and it's something that we try to do in a lot of our projects. It kind of brings the scale down, and we really enjoy getting into those details. So kind of in kind of summary, this is where we began, and then we kind of schematic design development, and then ultimately arrive at this at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Great work. So our final presentation this afternoon is by Rex Prater, whose firm Balance Architecture and Design works on public-private architectural projects for education, healthcare, retail, restaurant, and residential clients. He says they're an advocate for a design process that's equitable and serving each client with a high level of individual attention, thought, and detail. Giving respect to a client's objectives, values, and budget requirements, their workflow seeks to integrate a collaboration between all the players, the client, builder, designer, promoting an efficient, respectful, and personalized experience for all involved. He's based in Eugene, serves clients in Oregon, Washington, Arizona. Rex is our 2021 director-elect for the Eugene section. It's my pleasure to introduce Rex Prater.
Can you hear me, Stan?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm sharing my screen and I'd like to know if everybody sees my screen.
Yep.
Okay. Let's play slideshow and have some fun here. So thank you very much, Stan, for my introduction. I assume I'm good to go. I appreciate your introduction, kind words. Also, Bruce and Jeff, always a pleasure to see what you guys are doing. Love it. So thanks for sharing. The title of my project here is the Healthcare Clinic Design in a World of Social Distancing. And it sounds kind of all-encompassing, and that's not really my point. I have a project I'm currently in the process of, that's currently in a phase of construction. That's the project that I would like to highlight. And it's, see if I can get to my, yeah, okay. So, and that client is a service provider here in the healthcare world, Oregon Imaging Centers. They have a number of clinics in this region, and they serve, their clinics, first of all, are located in the 2 of the 3 hospitals in the region. And they serve clients from around the region, service, or we might say of all types, small, so in other words, small health care clinics send their patients to Oregon Imaging Centers for scans. And they have, I think, about 10 modalities. So MRs, PETs, CT scans. If it's about imaging, Oregon Imaging Centers provides that service. And so over the last year or plus, I have been working with them on their, what we call the University District Clinic refresh. And before I get too much further along here, I just wanted to, just for housekeeping, I'd like to give a shout out to my project team next, and just indicate that my intent here is to support or describe HSWs with 4 objectives. So thanks for listening, and I really hope, for my own sake, that I don't try to deep dive on anything in here, so I apologize ahead of time. So to give credits to the team, currently it's Summit Engineering for structural, and the general contractor in this project is Dorman Construction as GC. So followed by them, or within the design build team process of this project, we have for mechanical FM sheet metal, and working with Mazzetti Engineering for calculations. Then we have Sunset Electric and Harvey and Price for plumbing. So I just recognize the teams in these projects. It's a team effort. So next slide. Location is described as midway between, or partway between, the University of Oregon. I don't know if my little cursor will show up, but I'll assume it doesn't. We have university on one side of the hospital, or University District Hospital, and then we have downtown Eugene on the other side of the University District Hospital. And on the picture on the left, the photograph, just is let me just say an exterior view. The project, this is the case study, and this project includes the 3rd level of that building. And the Oregon Imaging Center, on the 3rd level there, they have, it's an organization composed of 16 MDs, 6 PAs, and approximately 40 member staff serve the clinic. And they often On high days, we'll do 300 patient exams a day is kind of their volume. We'll say a good volume day. And in the services, there's approximately 11 modalities. And like I said earlier, there's probably only about 5 actual modalities in this clinic. Some of the other clinics have other modalities that this clinic doesn't serve. So just to explain, my photos here is one of the MRs that I put in on a very early phase of this project, and it shows kind of some of the shielding. So part of what I enjoy about these presentations is, for myself, I enjoy kind of process views. And because this project, just to explain the slideshow, this project is not a true before and after because it's still in the process. So you may see lots of photos kind of between and never truly before, truly afterwards. So explain further the process, which has been over a year now. We kind of laid out, there's approximately 10 phases. So in this phase diagram, I show there. So color coding quickly, we made it through about 1 through 4, the green colors. Those phases in those areas, I'm not going to really dive into those, but those were completed phases in the targeted phases of this refresh. And we were into 6, and phase number 6, we had pretty much finished up at the end of last year, December. And in January, we were moving from 6 to phases 7 through 9. And it was a very sensitive schedule of phases because it was basically the front door of this facility. So the client's struggles here were handling their client load. As I mentioned earlier, it was up to 300 a day. Typically, there would be 30, 40 people in the waiting room. And this is a clinic that is in operation 7 days a week. So there were typically 75 procedures going on at any given hour. So there was a high volume, and we had to contend with that. We had some methodical exercises in how to phase the update of their front entry and their lobby. In the process of doing that design, we were increasing the lobby area, refreshing the lobby area from top to bottom. And then I was going to say, the intent of this case study is not to pursue 10 and 11, but advance my slide here. I just kind of diagram here what I just explained before, what I call the state shutdown. So ironically, in the month of January, we were waiting for some fixtures and components, you might say, for the refresh. So we wanted those on board, you might say, before we really engaged in the phasing process, because the phasing process had to be, as critical as it was, it couldn't be delayed for deliveries or components. So we wanted to be clear that we had, or sure that we had, and this is the general contractor's charge, everything in order and ready to go, rock and roll before you go, 7 through 9. And that was kind of our thought. And then COVID-19 hit. And this is in February, we realized that, and so that's what I refer to as the shutdown, meaning our state shutdown for COVID-19 response and flattening the curve. And we all understand that now. But at the time we didn't. And we might say we were a bit stunned in the process, trying to determine to what extent, you might say, we could continue forward with the project in the shutdown. Now, to our advantage, Oregon Imaging Centers is one of the few healthcare providers that remained open during the shutdown. So their services were essential. And all the procedures, non-elective procedures, as we all know now, were canceled. So only emergency services could be were scheduled. So all of a sudden we had this opportunity we took out of the crisis, the opportunity to combine or consolidate 3 phases in one operation or one phase. And that's because their volume was from 75 an hour down to 15 or so patients a day. So it was a significant drop. And you can see on the during shutdown diagram, I have a text at the top, so relocated reception. So the call volumes are so low, and 3 of the modalities were basically canceled within the suite. So they did chest x-rays and exams on COVID-19 patients. But having said that, there were a lot of precautions in those situations, but that's why their services were essential. So that was facilitated by one of the modalities that was kept open. So we relocated the reception. So we had the volume so low that made a lot of sense. And because of that, we were able to take over, in other words, the construction of the project phase, took over the entire space. So we just shut this facility down in those 3 phases, shut the entire area down, sealed it tight. And because it's in a hospital environment, you have those extra precautions anyway. But we took literally everything out all at once. And this is kind of in one of the phases of there's demolition and construction going on here because the time frame was really tight. Everything was happening all at once. So it just kind of shows you the magnitude of that decision in COVID-19 and how we kind of reacted and took advantage of it. And so, sorry, no glam shots, but I have contrasting kind of photos of the project in construction and almost complete, contrasted to kind of my modeling of what I was working out with the client for the design of this space. We, of course, always wanted more than we could take in space and materials. So we had a lot of balances that we needed to resolve for the budget and the limited space of the facility. So left is the front reception relocated. Above is kind of the mock-up model, and then below is preliminary lighting and the installation of some of the casework. The right side is just another perspective looking out into the waiting space, and the chairs below in the modeling. So we were up. Part of my exercise and planning was to bump or boost seat capacity. So it was up to about 50. Well, obviously that's changed. So I'm gonna try to introduce a few of the challenges that redirected some of our thoughts in the process. And this is just a quick slide here. In the month of February and then March, we took a pause, a break in the process, in the project, in the phase, till we understood what we could do. And to understand what we could do, I just showed you it was a consolidation in phases. But in that time, I just put some kind of some headlines in here, and there were lots of questions, just to back up, in February and March about what COVID-19 meant and what it meant to projects as design and as health, safety, welfare. So I put this, choir decided to go ahead with rehearsal headlines. I'm sure we've all heard that story up in Washington State. So I'm from Washington State, and my aunt was one of those choir members who contracted COVID-19 from a symptomatic choir member. And so it did have take on a personal kind of a meaning to me, the experience, or the unknown and the dangers. Just a big question about how does that happen, and how does affection happen within a space where they were all practicing social distancing, and yet they still had about 50% of them contract. And so I did some, I won't go into the details here, but I followed up with some studies CDC was publishing, and better understanding kind of the zones. And sorry, I'm trying to get to my next slide here. And what that meant to the organization, we started to take further look into other areas of their practice where we were concerned about employee, we say, social distancing and work groups. And they had so this is a work in progress. So as more information is revealed, and the more we can understand about the interior environment, our inclination at this point in time is to remove the Herman Miller systems that are kind of old and worn out anyway, but use this as an opportunity to kind of rethink how staff and triangulate how proximity and distancing can work in spaces that we hadn't really thought of as we started out in our master planning over a year ago. So that is a new finding in this project. As well for the client, I just kind of highlighted some things here. We had this design for the front reception that we had to take another look at post COVID-19, or I shouldn't say post, but as a consequence of COVID-19. In the beginning, our idea was to create, we'd say, an openness between the customer on the left and the staff member on the right. And now, and I won't go into the kind of the workflow of my client, but now we have to rethink that. We might say transparency, and so we're kind of coming up with some additional precautions and measures. So I kind of outlined some of them. Everyone's so besides the safety panels, which we're kind of trying to add back in, because we spent so much time doing careful casework design that sometimes it's kind of painful to feel like you've made a mistake. And so the other items there are kind of procedural changes the client has made to the construction team. As these phases continue forward, we've implemented these kind of outlined measures. So just more recognizing the social distancing, the airflows. The contractor has a person who's continually cleaning the work site. We're doing more remote meetings. It is a hospital facility, so they already have health checks before you can enter the facility. So that wasn't, so that's just an additional measure. And to close up, as this process is still unfolding or still in construction, these I have to give reference to because it's I think it's awesome. So besides the CDC, and I briefly mentioned that earlier in one of the slides, Oregon Health AIA Oregon COVID-19 resources. I hope everybody knows where that is on our webpage, because I think our AIA staff is awesome because they've assembled a lot of information there for us to go back to at any time. So very early on, I forgot exactly when, if it was March or April, Amy is another contributing member that I really appreciated. I think it was about the time we were trying to figure out how we start back into construction phase. And so thanks to the DLR group there for sharing their kind of white paper on that. And then here's just a kind of a web resource by Aaron that I had to give credit to for information. So I appreciate everybody's input on this and support. And thanks for listening. And back to Jim. You guys, are you back on?
I'll cover
got
for
it. Yes, thanks.
There's Jim. Yeah.
Thanks, Rex.
That's a yes. Okay, thank you.
Jim, you're muted.
I know, I can't unmute. Can't unmute.
There you go. We can hear you.
We got, you're good.
We heard you for a little bit there, Jim, then you went back on mute.
Oh, hi, Amy.
How's that?
That's good.
That's just great. We can hear you.
Any questions from the audience? 3 great performances. Thank you guys very much. Questions for Bruce?
Well, I got a question, Jim.
Okay.
Bruce, you mentioned some earlier design and some pushback from the planners in Talent. Can you talk a little bit about the previous design?
Well, when I started, you know, the economy of the building was paramount, and that led to the, you know, the pre-engineered building package idea. But, you know, I had researched the sort of the historical architecture in the area, and, you know, the sawmills and the different sort of vernacular agriculture buildings. So what I had was more along those vernacular lines of design, but not trying to replicate something from them. And when we presented it to the planners, the planning director and the consultant, they just said no way would they support it, even though all the Camelot people and myself thought it was a really good solution. And they came back to me and said, no, you need to do something Art Deco, Art Moderne. And, you know, the consultant started showing me pictures of, you know, Art Moderne gas stations. And I'm just going, you got to be kidding me, to myself, because there's no way I'm going to, you know, try and make some of those design elements work with a theater. But so I ended up with, I guess what you would call sort of the modified Art Deco. I mean, Ashland has the Varsity Theater, you know, a really great Art Deco theater a few miles away. And, you know, again, I had to create that backstory. And so came back with the design, you know, that you see with that backstory of about how that building could have evolved. And they were just tickled pink. So that was it, and we went for there. I'm no proponent of doing faux historical, you know, building design. That isn't the way I was educated. That's not the way I practice. But in that case, we had such a time crunch and no money that even though they didn't agree with the planning folks. There was just no room to push back.
Question for Jeff. Question for Rex. We're certainly a very quiet group.
I'm here.
I have a
No.
question. Oh, this is Gary Collins. I have a question for both Zach and Bruce, I think, regarding the air conditioning systems. For Zach, I'm wondering if you were not using ultimately a high volume, low flow system and segregating the area for the COVID. And for Bruce, same question, but only with respect for a high volume, low speed kind of system to minimize noise.
Well, the system on the theater was that,
Okay.
high, the low speed, high volume. All the ductwork was oversized, the diffusers, everything, and it just made a really great transition from heating to cooling and off and on. You literally don't notice it, which is what you want in a theater.
What part? Okay, this is Rex. I'm trying to answer part of Gary's question. So, mechanical system, unfortunately, is a real challenge in this facility. And one of our initial concerns, or I think what was driving our concern with COVID-19, was the outside air as a percentage. So we don't have at least at this time the opportunity to kind of resize our mechanical systems into newer volumes or lower volumes. So that's something that's still we're still in process to learn better. We're trying to, unfortunately, most everything is just simply top down. All the supplies from the top and returns to the top. So it's circulatory, which isn't ideal. At least in some of my studies. And how can we get it to be ideal? And at least at this point in our process, we don't have that opportunity. So I don't know if that, I hope that helps at least show you that we thought about it, though we don't always have the answers at the moment.
Could I ask a question of Jeff?
Yeah.
Jeff, in terms of post-occupancy evaluation type of thoughts, has the church seen an increase in the number of attendees, and are they very happy with what you've done? If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so baptisms are way up, so that's good. Yeah, souls saved. That's we're doing great in that department. Yeah, actually, the attendance has gone up, tremendously, and I wish we could discredit the design of the space, but the staff and kind of team at the church have done a lot of outreach, and kind of in addition to the refresh of the space, they've added a lot of kind of new programming and events. Like, I think a few weeks after we opened, we kind of cut the ribbon and opened it up, like they had like some, they used the lobby for like a breakdancing competition. So it's become, I'd say, in addition to, just, Sundays, like it's become a, community space. And I'd say one of the things that we've enjoyed seeing is, for instance, like that feature wall, that slatted wood feature wall, like, depending on the time, the year, like it's always like decorated in something different, if it's Easter or Christmas, or if it's just, some event that they're holding, that kind of ends up being like this kind of armature that they can kind of, decorate it, to meet kind of or like decorate it for, per the event. And so, I don't know, I think, the space has become, really just like this it's almost become as like important as the sanctuary in some ways, because now people actually use it and they have events out there. And, so I'd say we don't have any like we haven't gone through and like, done any polling or anything in terms of post occupancy, but I'd say, one thing, I love going on their Instagram feed, or just seeing how many people tag the space on Instagram, and you just see people's kind of random photos, in the space and occupying it. That's something. But, I think, they've definitely, in like the first year, I think it was something like they doubled their number of congregants to services. So I think that was certainly successful.
Well, that's very cool. And you mentioned Instagram. It's almost like we should add a category in our post-occupancy evaluation to social media posts, because I think that's become a pretty significant, at least in the kind of project you did, a significantly telling kind of thing in terms of the occupancy. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it seems like the
Any
other,
more questions?
yeah,
I got a question, Jeff. Go ahead, Stan.
well, maybe it's a comment as much as a question, but maybe there's an answer also. It seems like one of the presenting goals there was to integrate two congregations to put a new spin on the new creation, if you will, of the new organization. And it seems like in putting a new face on it, you certainly had a leg up on giving them a new self-image, and maybe even a new way to use that space that feels like it had a good chance to enhance that integration of two groups. So I don't know if there's any comment you have on that, but it feels like I'm not sure how to measure that, but that's another aspect of what you were trying to accomplish. It seems promising, and curious way.
I think one thing was they were looking to, I think part of the problem was, the congregation, kind of at the time we were brought in, had, like, they were really lacking, in terms of having a really kind of strong, kind of younger, membership and, youth. And they really wanted to, they were kind of looking, Nike's nearby, and there's all of these, young families that, maybe weren't going to church, and that they wanted to connect with, people that, it didn't feel like, maybe, it felt kind of like a refreshed and kind of more community oriented type of experience that would be attractive to, both like, younger members in the community and, kind of also the current, congregation. And so, like, I think that was, they certainly have now kind of balanced out their, age kind of mix, which was one of the kind of primary goals at the beginning. So.
One other comment, and that's just to say, I think this event that we're in, Jim, credit to you and others, is a great example of one of the advantages that we could bring from restructuring our statewide. We've just gone 300 miles up and down I-5 to look at 3 different projects, and I just appreciate each of you presenting, but also the opportunity to get that view. It just widens our horizons, and I think that's just a good thing. So that's it.
All right, and wrapping up, I apologize for the sound here. Somehow my computer lost its speaker in the mix. I want to thank Jeff Guggenheim, Rex Prater, and Bruce Richey for everything you did. It was terrific. And I'd like to encourage other members of AIA Oregon to contact me and Kathy Wendland to be included in a future digital design series presentation, AIA Oregon Presents. Also, I'd like to remind you of the June 3rd presentation by Paula Baker Laporte, FAIA from Ashland, Oregon. Nature is the gold standard for a healthy human environment. That's June 3rd at 5. And June 10th at 5. We are going to look at the Wells Fargo Center Tower renovation. That's really quite a project. West of West Architecture and Design Studio, Clay Taylor, AIA, and Jessica Harwell, project engineer for Turner Construction. So that's about it. And thank you so much for participating in this. We really enjoy it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you.
Good work, presenters.
Thank you, Jim.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Good work.